All right, good evening, everybody. I am Zach Ford, chair of the Dusty Baker Sacramento chapter of SABR, and I am very excited about this evening's event, this joint chapter meeting with the Lefty O'Doul San Francisco Bay Area chapter. I have a few announcements, and I'm going to pass it over to Marlene. She's going to take the lead for this evening. First, we have had some correspondence. A lot of people have asked me about a possible in-person meeting. We are looking into that possibly sometime this fall, late September, early October. I do have an inquiry into the Club Pheasant in West Sacramento, where we've had our last few in-person meetings, if people can still remember those, before switching over to Zoom. But hopefully we'll be able to make one of those work before the end of the year. Also, I was in communication with Mark McRae recently, and we are going to do another collaboration with the Pacific Coast League Historical Society, and the reunion for 2021 will also likely be on Zoom this year. We're looking at probably mid-October. So those are two exciting things that we're looking forward to, and hope that everyone can join us then. I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Marlene, and she's going to take the lead for the rest of the evening. Thanks, Marlene.
Thanks, Zach. I'm delighted that all of you could join us tonight as we celebrate Women in Baseball Week along with the IWBC. This is a much longer than a week celebration of all the activities that women are involved in with baseball these days. And tonight we're going to share with you the stories of 3 women in baseball, and we're going to have Jon Leonoudakis show us a trailer from his wonderful documentary called Shutout, the battle that American women waged to play baseball. And I'll ask Jon to put a link in chat. So if you want to catch the whole documentary, you can find it. I believe it's on Vimeo these days, right?
Amazon Prime.
Amazon Prime. Oh, even better. I have that. Okay. I'm sure all of you know Steve Tretter, who is our Lefty O'Doul chapter co-chair. Sherry Davis is with us. She is the first woman stadium announcer in any sport, not just in baseball, not just with the Giants. We have Anika Oreck, who, as you know, is a former local chapter member, an illustrator and author who's done a lot of work with the All-American Professional Girls Baseball League. And I think she's going to talk a little bit about her work and a little bit about this tonight. And then we also have the inimitable Perry Barber, who has been an umpire for 40 years now. Is that right, Perry?
41.
41. So she's going to talk a little bit about her career and some of the work that she's involved in. I'd also like you to consider saving the date September 10th through 12th for the 3rd annual Women in Baseball Conference. This is an IWBC SABR event. This year it's going to be both virtual and live. If you're traveling, you can get up to Rockford and enjoy multiple sessions and activities in person, or you can be like me and join virtually. And we'll put something in the chat about that as well. So we're going to get started here with Jon's going to show us a clip from Shutout, and then we will move on to our speakers. Thanks again for joining us. If you're not a speaker, please put yourself on mute. We'll put your questions in the chat. We'll talk about questions after each speaker, and then we'll have more at the end. So thanks again for joining us tonight. We're so happy you're here.
Well,
Jon?
everybody. Hi, everyone. I'm Jon Leonoudakis, and thank you, Marlene. I'm a baseball documentarian and filmmaker. I have 10 films in a permanent collection of the Hall of Fame. And I have a documentary series on Amazon Prime called The Sweet Spot. And our 3rd season was dedicated to a story with deep, dark, tangled roots where half the nation's citizens were denied access to its national pastime due to their gender. So it was a huge story. It is a huge story that still doesn't get enough run. So back in 2016, I decided to make a film about it, and I'm going to show you the trailer to that right now. If you just give me a moment, I will share my screen. You're all able to see that?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. Here we go.
One of my players was hit every single time she was at bat, just trying to play high school baseball. The entire league decided they would hit her.
American culture has thrown everything they can at them to keep them off the fields. After the war and after our league, League of Their Own, died, the women were supposed to go back in the house and forget about being Rosie the Riveter and being able to play.
It was awful. I had bullying, harassment, abuse, violence, everything you can imagine. See a connection between accessibility of women getting the chance to play baseball and what's going on in our country and the opportunities that women have in our country.
The politics of separate but equal don't apply. I mean, softball is not baseball.
I remember several games playing first base, and the first base umpire would be saying, you know, when are you going to switch to softball?
But why do girls who want to play baseball, why are they told, no, we have this other game for you? I had called 2 or 3 other fantasy camp directors, and 2 of them had basically laughed in my face, and the other one had hung up the phone. So my daughter's always been playing with the boys, but there were times where you would see a slide just a little bit harder, and then you would hear the, let's just get rid of the girl. Let's just take her out. And as a parent, it's like, what? They're 5 years old.
Mhm.
When you play with girls, you show that you respect them. All the girls who play baseball, they just want to be part of the team.
So I was the first girl in Nevada to play for a varsity baseball.
The way the press treats it is like, this is a freak of nature. Look at this girl. She can pitch. Look at this girl. She can hit.
What do you like about baseball?
It's just it's fun. And then I get to play some boys and show love.
Baseball for All is a national nonprofit for girls who want to get in the game, whether it's playing, umpiring, or coaching. Essentially, we empower girls to know that their dreams are worth it.
I want to be the first lady in the MLB.
So, you know, we played in the 2006 Women's Baseball World Cup, and we won gold that year, and it was fantastic.
Just this past fall, in 2015, I became the first woman to coach for a Major League Baseball organization, and that was with the Oakland Athletics.
Give them a chance. That's all we ask.
Don't let anyone tell you you can't do something because you're different.
Thank you, Jon. I think that's a great introduction to what we're talking about tonight. I did put IWBC and the SABR links in the chat. I'll send out detailed information to the chapters about the conference as well. So look forward to seeing that. So we're going to kick off tonight's presentations with Sherry Davis. As I mentioned, Sherry was the first full-time woman stadium announcer in any sport. So that's huge. And this was around 1992, 1993, right, Sherry?
93, yes.
1993. I will never forget the time I was in Cooperstown walking through the Hall of Fame, and I saw your picture on the wall. I thought that was so cool. And I know your papers are archived from the years that you were with the Giants. They're archived there at the Hall of Fame. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, great. Well, I'm going to turn this over to you because you'll tell a much more interesting story about yourself than I will. So thanks again for joining us. We look forward to your story.
Thank you. And I want to start by saying to Jon, I used to speak to a lot of children and grade schoolers and high schoolers. And I never failed to say to the girls that at some point they're going to try to make you play softball. If you don't want to do it, you don't have to do it. You can play baseball. I made a point of doing that. For those who don't know the story, in 1990, at the end of the 92 season, it was pretty well established that the Giants were sold. They were going to Florida. And then there was a local group that got together and saved the Giants. And they decided to have a new PA announcer. And they held open auditions. And I really didn't go there thinking I was going to get the job. I went there because I was a baseball fan and I just wanted to hear my voice over the loudspeaker. I thought it would be a kick. And it was a beautiful day and they'd made changes to the outfield and I just wanted to be in the park. And I went there and there were 500 people auditioning and only 9 were women, only 9 out of 500. And that really irked me because I went there as a fan and there's so many women fans and they just, I was just annoyed. And it took maybe an hour and a half before I heard a woman's voice. And this woman, we announced 2 batters. Now batting, left fielder, Barry Sweet Buns Bonds. And steam was coming out of my ears. She just reinforced every horrible stereotype about bimbo baseball gals. So I got up there and I don't know how much later, and I announced my 2 batters and I got applause. And I was kind of shocked and I was going back to my seat and guys were going, was that you? Good boys. And as I left, my section that I'd been sitting with for a couple hours were chanting my number, 161, 161. So I left and I thought, oh my gosh, this is a possibility. And I had that walking on air feeling. And I was a full-time legal secretary, very heavy litigation desk. But how can I do this? But you're going to do it if you're chosen. You're going to do it. So they called us back. They called 9 people back, and we hadn't put in resumes or anything. But they, of the 9, 7 had voice training, or they worked in a voice industry. It was really interesting. There were good voices there. They just gave you the information. You had to put it in baseballese. It was, manager Dusty Baker, lineup, first pitch, so-and-so. Ladies and gentlemen, will you please rise? And now it's announced by the manager Dusty Baker. And they threw in all these hard names to say. And the management came back and they said, we've narrowed it down to 3. And I went, oh no, I'm a token. Because I thought either they would decide for a woman or not. It was such a divergent audition. And I ended up getting it, and my life just changed forever. And it was just a wonderful, wonderful job. And the players are so supportive of me. And of course, Dusty Baker is the most wonderful man. And he was very, very kind to me. And you had asked about people who helped. And there were quite a few. Robin Carr, who worked in PR with the Giants. I could always go to her and I'd go, oh, so-and-so did this and said this. And she said, oh, he's a jerk. He's always been a jerk. That would make me feel better. And Bob Stevens, longtime baseball writer with the Giants in New York, and came back out here. And he was up in years, and he was the official scorekeeper. And one day I was sitting at my desk there, and there had been a really nasty letter to the editor with the Sporting Green about me, and I was not feeling so hot. And I was the only one in the press box, except for Bob. And Bob came over, and I don't remember the exact quote, but he said, never underestimate the stupidity of the American public, or something like that. And he was so nice to me. There were so many people. Ed Badix, a writer, was very nice to me. There were a lot of people that were nice, and I got a lot of support. But as you know, it was a much bigger deal than it should have been. I mean, I was on the evening news. I was on Entertainment Tonight. I was on the the cover of USA Today. It should not have been that big a story, but it was. And the thing was, you never knew who was going to support you and who wasn't. And I also learned not to judge people by what I knew about them from the press. I had two early interviews. I call them the Petes, Pete Franklin and Pete Rose. Pete Franklin, if you don't know, he was a kind of shock jock. He was one of the first ones. If he didn't invent the toilet flush sound to get rid of callers, he was one of the first to use it. I went, oh no. And another was Pete Rose, and I thought, oh no. And with Pete Franklin, he kept saying, it's not the Pete Franklin show, it's a Sherry Davis show. And he was delightful to me. And Pete Rose, I got him head on. I said, Pete, you're a hard-nosed ball player. What do you think about a woman announcer? He said, I played in Japan. I have no problem with it. All the announcers in Japan are women. And he was delightful to me. And there were some people whom I admired very much, writers and players and broadcasters, whom I expected to support me, who didn't. And that was very heartbreaking. But as I say, overwhelming support. But some of the things that were so funny. One guy wrote, I'll be damned if I'll go to the ballpark and hear a high-pitched woman's voice announce Will Clark. If you've ever heard Will Clark, his voice is about an octave higher than mine. So that tickled me. And at one time, it was a terrible day game. We were losing 14-2, I think it was. And there was hardly anybody left in the stands at that point. It was the bottom of the eighth. And the opposing manager was making wholesale changes. I think changed the whole field. And I'm up there with my glasses trying to get guys' numbers and positions. If I didn't get them running out and see their number on the back of their shirt, I was doomed. I didn't have it. That's the only way I would know. If they turned around, I didn't have their number and they're bench players for the Expos or something, who knows? And while I'm doing this, I hear these young guys behind home plate going, Sherry, Sherry. So finally, when I'm finished, I looked down and he went, you suck. We're losing 14-2. I'm the one sucking. Okay. So I just learned, oh, about Pete Rose too. I read up on him. And in the bad old days when the black ball players couldn't stay in the hotels, usually the opposing team, the black players on that team would take them in. There were 2 or 3 white guys who did it. And one of them was Pete Rose. So I learned really not to judge. And another thing, I think it might happen to everybody, but I think it's particularly malicious with women. The most egregious thing was Isla Borders. After her first outing in independent ball, there's a little section of the sporting green that was the digest. It was just miscellaneous little things. And it had on there that she had hit a couple of batters, that she'd walked batters, that batters had hit multiple hits off of her. It was just horrible. It was like the worst outing you could imagine. And a couple of days later, not in the sporting section, but in the front page, on the inside page where there's corrections, none of that had happened. It was all wrong. And I wish some SABR person would look into that, find out who wrote that, and if anything ever, if he ever suffered any repercussions. I feel safe in saying it was a he. But I'd say 99% of the people who read that about Isla never saw that correction. And it just broke my heart, and it made me so mad. And that happened to me. When I would talk to people, I tell them the story. I tell on myself. I tell stories on myself to illustrate what a steep learning curve there was. And my second game, bottom of the eighth again, Mark Carrion was coming on as a pinch hitter. And I wanted everybody to know that I knew what was happening, right? So I announced him, and the umpire looked up at me, and I went, what are they looking at? Well, I'd seen him point to the backstop before, but I thought they were alerting the benches. I didn't know that it was to me, and I didn't know that I wasn't to announce any batter until they pointed at me. So I would tell this fibs, and I never did again. I never, ever, ever in my life again announced a batter before the umpire pointed at me. But someone obviously heard one of my speeches and maliciously went on the radio and spread that. And to this day, it's gospel that that's the way I operated. Greg Papa, a while ago, was interviewing my successor, Rennell, and he brought it up. He said, well, Sherry Davis, she announced batters before the umpire pointed at her, which I never did. So if any of you know Greg Papa, set him straight, ask him that, talk to Ed Montague, he'll confirm my story. But you just can't believe what you read about people in don't prejudge people. That's what a big takeaway I had from this. Another thing on KNBR. This is another sexist thing, really bad. I heard more than once, I go to the ballpark to get away from women. You said I go to the golf course to get away from insert race, creed, ethnicity, anything. You'd be thrown off the air. Everybody uproariously laughing. So sexism is not treated as sexism, as an ill. It's treated as, a joke. So that's something that really needs to be addressed. And hopefully we're raising young guys now who are not threatened by women, who are not angry at women. It was mainly young guys. Old guys, I'd ask them, what do you think? They say, well, I don't know. You know what you're doing. That's okay. Then support me. And I was able to help enough. There were 2 women announcers the year in '94 after me. One was Leslie Sterling with the Red Sox. And another, I forget this woman's name. She was with the Dallas All-Stars, the hockey team. And I talked to both of them, and I was able to tell them, don't read any letters that don't have a return address on them. Don't listen to talk radio. You really had to isolate yourself from the negativity and just focus on the positivity, because, I get letters from young girls and mothers and fathers, and it was just wonderful. But I'm really glad we've got more women in the front office and in major positions. We've got trainers, women coaches, women broadcasters. But I won't be happy until we have a woman ball player. And I don't see any reason why that can't happen. It might have to be someone like Tony, not like a Tony Stone, because the days are long past so you could have a shortstop whose main job was to put runners on base, move runners along. Even shortstops now have to be big bangers. So it might have to be a pitcher, but there's no reason why it couldn't be. There's no reason on God's earth why we can't have a woman umpire. None on this earth. And sideline reporters, I'm really happy we have women sideline reporters. God bless them. They know what they're doing. But I won't be happy until the day there's a sideline reporter who is the physical embodiment of, say, John Madden. I mean, God bless the tall, skinny, blonde, beautiful women who know what they're doing. God bless them. But you shouldn't have to look like that to get that job. So there's a lot of work still to be done. I guess that's all I have to say right now. See, thank you for having me. Thank you.
Thanks, Sherry. I was wondering who trained you and what your game day preparation was like. Did they used to have game notes like they have those extensive game notes as we can get them today?
Well, nobody trained me. I had nobody training me. I didn't have a spotter. I had nothing.
Wow.
So that's why I say it was a steep learning curve for me. And the copy that I got came from all different sources, and it was the worst. It was never proofread. I remember when it was Matt Williams was receiving some little, I don't know whether it's Babe Ruth League or something award. And they said past winners were so-and-so and so-and-so and Stan Musical instead of musial.
Wow.
Musical. And the grammar was awful. So I got there an hour ahead of when the pregame started, because I had to read through copy and I had to rewrite copy like crazy. It was really terrible. copy.
So this was the copy, in addition to announcing the lineups and the game.
The pre-game ceremonies, the between game announcements, joint Giants type thing, all that type. I had a lot of copy that I had to do. Yeah, but I had no training and nobody spotting for me or anything. It was heavy duty.
Did you have to gather that information, or they sent it to you?
They gave it to me. They gave it to
Okay.
me. I used to have literal nightmares. I would be in the booth and I wouldn't have the lineups. And Tommy Lasorda was that way. He would wait till the very last second to get the lineups out. It was some kind of gamesmanship he was playing, but it would drive me crazy because I had to get it written down. And so I had nightmares. I was running all over the park trying to find it. I did. I had that once.
This is a great story. If anybody else has questions, if you want to put them in the chat, we can come back to them later. I want to keep an eye on the time because I can kind of go on and on. So Steve and Zach, help me keep an eye on the time here. Dan has a question. We'll take Dan's question and then we'll move along to our umpire. Have you been in touch with any of the 4 current female PA announcers, or are they you? Seems like they would want to honor the trailblazer.
No, I haven't. Renelle is always very kind when she speaks of me. And I'd never met her, but when she got the job, I sent her a note congratulating her and wishing her well and hoping that she has as much fun doing it as I did. But no, I haven't spoken to any, and I don't know who the 4 are. I only know Renelle.
Well, the A's, Amanda Schimmel is with the A's. Dan?
There's one for the Mets and one for the Orioles.
Really?
Jim, who's the Orioles announcer?
That just happened this year, so I don't really know. I think it happened this year. Don't quote me on that.
Oh, yay. I'll have to find out about that.
And Amanda started when she took over for Dick Callahan over here across the bay. Yeah. Great. Thank you so much. If people put other questions in the chat, and I've got some other questions we'll talk about later. And Anika says, Anika, did you know Anika's dad, Ray Orrock? She says, I wanted to say my grandpa just thought you were terrific. He was a Bay Area daily columnist, and I somewhat recently came across a mention of you in one of his columns. I'm in the process of archiving them all, but when I find it, I'll get it to you somehow.
Oh,
that's great.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll take Perry's question and then we'll move on to you, Perry. Perry says, I have a nosy question for Sherry about her contract with the Giants. Did they pay her enough that she could quit her other job?
No.
You worked both jobs?
Oh, yes.
Wow.
The first year was really hard. I did over 300 interviews that year. I worked a full-time job, and my mother was dying that year in Virginia. So that first year was really, really tough. After that, the second year, I found a law firm that hired me full-time in the winter. And in the summer, I would temp at that law firm. And when I had a day game, I would be able to do it without having to worry. So it wasn't a great law firm, but they accommodated my schedule. So no, I had, as always, I had to work 2 jobs.
Right. Does anybody know, is that true today still? Or do most PA announcers, is this their only job? Does anyone know?
I doubt it. I doubt that anyone pays enough a living wage for that.
Okay, interesting. Okay, thank you, Sherry. Perry, you're up next. Perry Barber has been an umpire since 1981. She's umped at all levels. She's been an umpire in Japan and in the Caribbean. Perry works tirelessly as an umpire and tirelessly to mentor women as umpires and support women in all aspects of baseball. She's also a historian, who's doing work on the pitcher, Maud Nelson. Perry, we're going to turn it over to you and enjoy listening to you tell your story as an umpire and bring us up from the beginning to today.
Thank you. And Sherry, thank you. Your story is just absolutely fascinating and so instructive for other women to learn from and take heart from and find encouragement in the way you somehow managed to struggle with all of those different elements that you were talking about and still maintain the kind of professionalism and expert approach to your job that you did, and to deal with your detractors, which I had to laugh about because I don't feel at home until somebody boos me on the field. They come a little less frequently now after 41 years, thankfully, but they still come. So I actually experienced kind of the opposite pole of the encouragement that you got immediately upon trying out for your job. With my first audition as an umpire, I auditioned, I applied for a job as a Little League umpire in 1981 when the major league players were on strike that summer. And my mother was the one who suggested to me that I do that because I had recently fallen in love with baseball. I was 28 years old at the time, which is kind of old to not have liked baseball your entire life up to that point. But I didn't. I went to a private school in New York and was not geared towards athletics at all. I was geared towards literary pursuits, and I was a musician and a songwriter and a quiz show denizen for a long time before I got into umpiring in 1981. And to this day, I don't know if I ever would have thought of umpiring as something I would do or could enjoy or be good at if my mother hadn't suggested it to me. And it's kind of a miracle that she did, because what mother suggests that to her daughter, even now in 2021, or a parent? It's such a rare and unusual thing to suggest to a daughter, a grown daughter, but she did. She saw something in me that the way I think about it was a better, stronger person in me that was yearning to emerge, but that couldn't and didn't until I started umpiring and learning the Tao of umpiring. And there's so much about it that is so cerebral and counterintuitive. It's a very Zen exercise to umpire. But no, seriously, I know there's a lot of activity going on around you, but the interior landscape, especially for an umpire, is actually quite calm under most circumstances. Even though you've got all that adrenaline going, it's sort of like a study in contrasts. And to me, that's one of the really special and appealing things about umpiring, is that it has so many different elements to it that I am irresistibly drawn to, and that I'm so glad I found my way to, and that my mother pointed me in that direction. And I also have to mention my identical twin sister, Warren, who, after I started umpiring Little League that summer, to great acclaim and enthusiasm, as a matter of fact, the coach, my second game Little League, threatened to pull his team off the field just at the sight of me. Seriously, he couldn't deal with the fact that a woman was there to umpire his 10-year-old players. So anyway, I sort of took a stand for the first time in my life, which was unusual for me because I grew up in New York in a very kind of rarefied strata. I went to private school with my twin, and we had went to dancing school and took ballet lessons, piano lessons, and basically grew up with silver spoons in our mouths. We're debutantes. There was nothing in our background that would have ever led anybody to believe that I would wind up as a baseball umpire playing in the dirt. But that's what happened. Like I said, there was something in me that I think was yearning to emerge. And until I started umpiring, I just didn't know how to liberate that part of that aspect of my character. And it's just been a very interesting and rewarding journey, those 41 years. I'm sort of astounded that I'm still active as an umpire. It astounds a lot of people too, who don't, keep constant track of me. And I talk to them after a year or two and they say, oh, of course you're not still umpiring. I said, no, yeah, I just worked a tournament last week. I was doing 4 games a day. I mean, seriously, Justine's tournament in Aberdeen, Maryland with the 500 plus girls. It was just the greatest thing I've ever done. And it was exhausting, but just a beautiful thing and if any of you have never been in the vicinity of girls playing baseball with and against other girls, it's just the most soul enriching experience. I mean, it stirs the romantic in you to hear the pure, unadulterated joy that those girls feel at being with other girls, playing the sport that they love, and that so many of them have been told that they shouldn't be playing still now. Jon Leonoudakis could tell you that, and you could watch his film on Amazon Prime or Vimeo and find out. It's really kind of astonishing that in this day and age that people would think to tell girls, no, you shouldn't play baseball because you'll never get a college scholarship and you'll be taking away a scholarship from a boy who deserves it and could go on to pro ball and really make something of his life in baseball. Well, that's because opportunities in baseball have routinely and historically been denied, including umpiring opportunities. But so much of that has changed just in the last 10 years through the work of women like Justine Siegel and of great writers and journalists who push the issue, and of organizations like SABR and women like Marlene, who are very strong advocates and beat the drum, and just so thankful for everybody that chimes in, and for Anika, who tells the story of the All-American girls with such artistry and humor, and just love your work, Anika, and I'm so privileged to be here with both you and Sherry. So anyway, umpiring has been a very interesting and rewarding journey for me. I started in Little League and, got all of the criticism and bad attitude from everybody. As a matter of fact, the reason that my twin sister Warren became my first steady partner was because none of the other Little League umpires would umpire with me. They absolutely refused. And the assigner who hired me, I guess, felt sorry. I kept badgering him. When am I going to get a partner? When am I going to get a partner? Everybody else had a partner. And he finally said, well, can you find somebody? And I said, yeah, I have somebody. And my twin sister, bless her heart, who lived in Los Angeles at the time, came out to Palm Springs, which was where my mother lived. And I was with her when she suggested it to me. And the Little League was in a little town about 30 miles down the road named Indio. So my sister became my first steady partner. And I really think that without her constant presence and support in that early part of my career, that I probably would have quit, because it can be very discouraging and lonely being told all the time that you're brutal, you suck, you don't belong out here, what are you doing here, you're ruining it for everybody. And to me, that is so illustrative of one of the great and tragic paradoxes of umpiring is that right at the beginning of an umpire's career, and nobody starts in the major leagues or minor leagues, everybody starts in, little league or youth leagues, getting their feet wet, learning the ways of umpiring, learning the rules of each level, things like that. But right at the beginning of every umpire's career, when we need support and encouragement the most, is when we get it the least, because we don't have the expertise or the skill level yet to earn praise and encouragement. Instead, we get, you suck, go home. What are you doing? Why are you here? I heard a lot of that, go home and have a baby if you can. People were not kind, and actually women could be exceptionally cruel. It was very surprising. But I learned, as sensitive and delicate a flower as I am, to absorb that kind of punishment, and learning that art of deflecting all of that bad, attitudes, bad vibes, toxicity directed toward me, I think has been such a really wonderful tool to learn for me in my daily life, in my relationship with other people too. Not because my friends, always tell me that I'm brutal and I suck, but because in my encounters with, people I don't know, going to the store, doing chores, errands, things like that, you encounter a lot of different people every day. And especially me, working, 7 to 10 games a week, I can encounter a lot of different characters within that framework, and learning how to interact with each of them and to adjust to their temperaments and their ways of the dynamics that they're used to imposing on even a temporary relationship, and still getting out of it the result that I want, has been a very important part of my growth as a human being. Very important. And that's why I think that umpiring is such a great thing to do for anybody, whether or not you intend to become a professional or to even continue it as an avocation. It's just a lot of fun. Yeah, it's fun. And one thing I must point out is that the abuse and the contempt that is directed our way during an actual game, whether it's 7 innings or 9 innings, is a very fleeting part of the overall experience. Most umpires at any level, little league to major league, would tell you that the overall experience is magic. There's nothing like it. It's just this sort of, your heart pounds, but it's very serene. And you just feel at one with the universe, at one with the baseball, at one with the sky and the grass and the activity going on around you, but you're still able to focus on what's right in front of your eyes with a laser-like focus, and just be the baseball, be the game. Umpires are not out there to insert our personalities and take over the game and do things that make people remember us, because most of the time when they do, it means we did something wrong. So most of us prefer anonymity to a certain degree, although a little appreciation goes a long way, a long, long way. And it's just, it's been very instructive learning all of these things from umpiring that I'm not sure that I would have learned if I hadn't been an umpire all these years. And I still learn so much every game, every day. I see something new. I learn a new way to interact with somebody. I had a coach come up to me just last week and challenge me on a call, he wanted me to ask my partner for help, which under most circumstances, it's a courtesy for an umpire to do that. We're not required, unless it's a manager or a catcher asking us to appeal on a checked swing, that we're required to do. But if I make a call at first base and it's, a close play that a manager might disagree with me, he can come up to me and say, can you check with your partner? And I might do what I did to this coach. I said, I could check with my partner, but I'm not going to, because it's not her call. And I'm not going to put it on her to make a call that she probably didn't have as good a view of as I did. And he looked at me and he said, I umpire too. I'm going to use that reply. I like that because I didn't take an attitude with him. I didn't say, no, I'm not going to ask, get away from me. And I didn't immediately, fall all over myself trying to please him, saying, yes, of course, I'll do that. Which before I became an umpire, I might have done, because I was raised to be charming and pleasant and accommodating. I wasn't raised to stand up for myself, take a stand, be an activist, be forthright. That just wasn't the way I was raised. I was raised to, be intelligent and find a good husband and raise a family and have a happy life. And I have had a very happy life, but not because of those things, but because umpiring has enriched it so wonderfully. And a lot of that has been the people that I've met. And all of you here are part of that wonderful circle of friends and people that I have come to know through umpiring. And I don't know if I'm, waxing poetic. That's my sort of signal to myself to, before you can't turn the faucet off. So if anybody wants to ask me anything specific, please feel free. If you want to start umpiring, it's never too late. Like I said, I didn't start until I was 26, and most umpires that reach the level that I do started when they were way, way younger. And umpiring needs umpires. There is a very scary shortage of umpires in amateur baseball because so many umpires quit before they ever have the chance to become good or to develop an affection for it the way I have, which is hard to do when all you get is negativity and criticism. But to get past that and to reach the stage that I've attained, or that other umpires have attained, and most umpires probably get there a lot quicker. I was very slow, I admit it. I have to do things 3 or 4 times before, where other umpires would do them once and they'd be, perfect. I was never like that. It was always hard work for me, and I had to apply myself. But getting past that, and
Perry?
Yes.
So wanting to be mindful of time, but we've got a couple of questions here.
Sure.
One is from Jim Gates, who has been an umpire, and he says, as an umpire, I've had more problems with the parents than the players. Is that your experience? And then the
Absolutely.
Next question is, did you ever want to throw in the towel?
Oh, yes, many
More
times.
trouble with
Yeah,
parents?
parents are a huge problem. I think they should be banned from any youth baseball game, high school, just banned, or that they should sit in a special section that has a glass enclosure so you can't hear them. Because in my experience, when a parent is at a child's baseball game, the child doesn't hear "good job, good swing, good catch." They hear that voice. And that voice is the voice of, you're not good enough. You didn't swing the right way. You didn't do this properly. You didn't do what I taught you. It's very interesting the way that can work on a kid's mind.
Yeah.
And I see so much of it draining the joy and the love for the game away from children. And it really breaks my heart. So yeah. I wish that parents had a better attitude when they're watching their kids play, a lot of them become very abusive, and they don't seem to, it's an entitlement for them in some way.
I think that's probably a whole nother conversation for folks who work with kids and the coaches and the umpires who work with the kids. Last question for you, and then we're going to move on to Anika. We did plan to make this a little bit longer meeting tonight, so we usually just go an hour. We're planning for an hour and a half or so. So I hope everybody can stay with us. Were you ever tempted to throw in the towel?
Like I said, early on in my career, many times, and if it hadn't been for my sister's constant support and my mother's sort of puzzle support, she'd say, when are you gonna, get a real job? And I said, Mom, I gave up a real job so that I could have this job. Because not that I'm making so much more money, but it just fulfilled me. And bless her heart, she never gave me too much grief about that. So yeah, there were plenty of times, and I imagine that a lot of umpires experience that, just wanting to give up, walk away, because the overall experience when you are young and inexperienced is not great. But learning how to deal with that is great. I always say, it's not what happens to people in our lives that makes us what we are. It's how we learn to respond to what happens that makes us who we are. So,
well, thank you very much. I think I'm going to think about umpires a little bit differently now. And next time I see you,
I hope so.
We'll have a conversation about your conversations with other umpires along these lines as well. I'd be very curious about how the male umpires, if they feel the zen of it as well. I think that's a wonderful way to look at it. I will.
Oh, you know what? I know one who does. And Sherry, thank you for mentioning him. Ed Montague is one of my favorite umpires ever. Just love him to death. I actually went to umpire school with his younger brother, Mike, and got to be good friends with Eddie because he was on a crew with my instructors from umpire school, Harry Wendelstedt and Randy Marsh. So thank you for mentioning him.
Perry, thank you so much for sharing your experience and sort of the zen of it. I really like that. Someone, I think it was maybe Steve, suggested you write a book. So we're going to move to Anika Orrock, who is a former San Franciscan who's now living in Nashville, and she's the granddaughter of a legendary Bay Area columnist, Ray Orrock. And I think you've loved baseball forever, right, Anika? I talk about Anika as an illustrator and an artist, but she's a cartoonist, a designer, a writer, a humorist, an archivist, and a baseball devotee. Her work has been commissioned by the National Pastime Museum, Merrill Lynch, New West Records, the IWBC, the All-American Girls Professional Baseball League Players Association, some MLB organizations, and international sports publications. She's passionate about the history and current roles of girls and women in baseball, and she's enjoyed collaborating with organizations to educate and promote the advancement of girls in all areas of the sport. I love this line. Anika currently lives in Nashville, but she left her heart in San Francisco. That's from her recent book. So Anika, it's all yours. And if we have some time when you're finished, we'll take questions and maybe some general questions for the entire group. Thanks, Anika.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me and for the introduction. That sounds like a lot. I didn't realize how many things I do. But you haven't seen me tap dance, so it's not as pretty. But I'm happy to be here. Thank you. And I guess so. I will just kind of jump into a sort of an abbreviated version of a presentation that I had the pleasure of giving during the Baseball Hall of Fame Symposium. The Cooperstown Symposium was virtual this last year. And it has kind of a larger story, but for our purposes, I'm going to sort of distill it down to the experience of this book and how I got into this. And what my experiences are, which are very different, but also I think, well, as you will see, even though we have a lot more representation of women in baseball right now, it's still so far from where it should be. And a lot of my experiences are really not that different than the experiences of Sherry and Perry, who, Perry has, and this is not trying to make you feel old, Perry, but Perry started umpiring the year I was born, I believe, 1980. Is that right? Yeah. So, but my point is to say that if I'm still having some of these experiences and I'm nodding my head and understanding what these women are talking about, then that's pretty indicative of where we're at and where we're heading, which is great. But of course, the topic that I wrote about in this book and illustrated is about a baseball league that began over 75 years ago. Who also, so as you can see, this is, but I'm going to share my screen and just share a little bit with you because it's such a visual, everything I do is so visual. Here, let me just get past this. This is the opening title screen, but this will just give you an idea of how I got started anyway. This is what I was usually doing in my baseball illustration and writing career, was really just having fun. I don't know if you can tell I'm having fun, but that's pretty much as much fun as someone who does what I do can have. And getting to sit where I got to sit and visiting different ballparks. But this is about 5 years ago, which is pretty delayed. I'm 41 years old. 5 years ago to have this realization going through all of these illustrations that I don't have really any illustrations that included women. So, with the exception of a couple of fans in the stands, it just, as I was compiling drawings for this other book that I didn't realize that Marlene has, it was kind of an unusual, a little self-published thing I did before my first book, but I was compiling drawings for that. And it just sort of struck me that I'm a woman. I'm the only woman up in this area. Usually, every once in a while, I'd run into Renelle or Amy G in the broadcast level. But and I just, story for me is the part about baseball that I love. Like Jon's, your documentary films, Jon, and so many other artists and filmmakers and people who work in baseball. The thing that I love that really ties it all together for me, especially because I have an awful memory and I can't, for example, John Miller will, just a casual conversation will spout out, well, that was the game that he, and he hit a triple in the ninth, and then this, and then this happened, and that was 1976. It's like, oh my God, how do you, obviously that's a special talent, but I lack that very much so. So the story in baseball is, to me, what connects us, what connects all of us to baseball in some way. We all have our baseball stories of how we came to be in it, how we came to love it, our familial connections, all of that. So knowing that and knowing that was what connected me, I felt like there was a piece missing. So I started digging for stories about women in baseball. Oh, here's another. Is this shown on my screen sharing, this window here of the camera? I'm trying to, let me get rid of that. There we go. Oh, I just posted this one the other day in honor of Dwayne Kuiper because he was back in the booth for for the game. And like I said, illustrating stories. I'll fly through some of these, I apologize, but just in the interest of time. And so I started digging for stories of women in baseball. And of course, A League of Their Own was the first place that I thought of to go, because that was really the only story that I knew, which, once you dive in, you realize that's just a teeny tiny sliver of women's involvement in baseball since baseball, really. But so I wanted to dig more, and I explored a lot more about women in baseball, but I kept coming back to this. And the reason was that some of these women's stories were available in various forms, either through the website or just through, university archives of interviews and such. And what what was interesting to me that happened was that in reading more about these women's actual, the real stories that were sort of fictionalized and Hollywoodized for A League of Their Own, is that there was so much about their story that resonated with me. And I wasn't expecting that because I didn't play baseball. I played baseball, and then when I wanted to actually play baseball at school, there was no option. And I really didn't want to play softball, which, a lot of people are very adaptable that way athletically. I am not. And I just wanted to play what I wanted to play because it wasn't available. I just didn't. But there was other aspects of these women's stories that really resonated with me. And this is the first woman I came across, which is funny because she's, not a star in the league. She's not very well known. She didn't, I don't even know that she played on a team. The Colleens, who she played for, was considered like a minor league team. They had two, minor league training teams that would barnstorm, and they were kind of the, the farm teams for the AAGPBL's brand of baseball. And, but I read about her growing up in Chicago, how she used to shine the shoes of gangster kingpins. And, her nickname was Polish for Little Rag because she was constantly getting a bloody nose while she was out playing. She would run herself into a wall or bend down to get the ball. And I got a lot of bloody noses as a kid. I guess maybe that part resonated with me too. But there was something about it that was just like, this is great. This is a great story. I want more. So I started digging in, and needless to say, long story short, after digging in these stories, I thought I gotta figure out a way to tell these stories. And really my initial intention was just to share them and illustrate them and really not do anything else. And when I pitched this book to Chronicle Books, they said they wanted to do it, but they also said, it's been over 25 years since the movie A League of Their Own has come out. And that means there's a whole generation of girls that don't really know about this. So there's a lot of people who don't know this exists. So we want the whole thing. We want the whole history. And I said, that's great. Okay. So who's going to write it? And the editor said, well, you are. And that was also a big surprise. So I really loved hearing about Sherry's experiences, showing up because she had a love for it and a passion for it. And that was really, that combined with the talent and the background is what got you the job, Sherry. But then, just the whole notion of like, okay, well, we believe in you enough to do whatever you got to do it. And I also have some things to say about Greg Papa, but I won't. I have opinions about him too. I had experience with him. But, there were a couple of very surprising things. I was not surprised by the athleticism. I knew these women were good, but hearing their stories and reading about what the perception was about them in the beginning and how that perception sort of melted away to just the astonishment of everyone. It never stopped. And John, in your documentary, I love how it's like, I believe it was Jenny Ring talking about what a novelty it is. Like, oh my gosh, she can hit. Oh my gosh, she can run. Oh my God, like as if we're just lumps that have no idea what to do until suddenly we're on a diamond. I don't know. But the level of athleticism in the 1940s to me was just incredible. But then of course there was the femininity aspect. And I actually, I'll be honest, I had a lot of fun with that because there is like a real juxtaposition there of these real hard-nosed, amazing athletic women that had this opportunity that women had never had before. And, as you can see, these women in the dugout and, they're getting strawberries on their thighs from sliding in these ridiculous skirts. But then they had to look feminine. They had to be feminine. They had to have lipstick on at all times. They were actually fined if they weren't wearing lipstick, which I think is really interesting. But, it's easy for us to look at this. And I actually, some of the criticism that I got for putting this book out there was, how can you glorify this time when women were so, oppressed or so, made into these, they were just under the thumb of male patriarchy, doing what men wanted. They're playing baseball, but they had to do it in skirts and lipstick. And a lot of those comments came from other women, like, how can you why are you doing this? Why are you celebrating this? But what they didn't know and what I wanted to convey was what this story was like from the perspective of the women who actually did it. So, this is the 1940s, but also women had never even had an opportunity like this. And a lot of them, if not all of them, would say, if it weren't for the skirts and the lipstick and the femininity angle, it wouldn't have worked because society just was not equipped to handle something like that at that point. And I would say that in a lot of ways, they still are not. And this was really what facilitated the success, because then it allowed them to do what they really love to do in a way that was palatable to the American public. But what did surprise me, or what was interesting, is when I started getting into, I started asking myself these questions about why it hasn't happened since. And coming across things like this, we'll just show you where we're at, that this is still a lot of the focus. Sherry was mentioning, sideline reporters and, how this is still kind of a requirement, right? And I will take a step further and say, I would love to see someone working on the sidelines that looks like John Madden, that also is not white, because I have been, well, won't go into big stories right now, but very recently, I've been asked to participate in a couple of things that I refused, after some learning, I decided to graciously back out of and refuse to do, because it was very clear that I was a token. And that can be very dangerous when you're the only person there, which is why I think, as I will talk about later, and as we saw at the Baseball for All competition, how important it is for girls to have the opportunity to play with one another, because not only is there not that pressure of perfection, Sherry, both of you were talking about just being pounced on at the very first opportunity for some mistake. If you had been a man, that would have been part of the growing process. And but being a woman, it's like they're watching your every move, they're waiting for you to mess up. And really, the only thing that will save you if you mess up is being really cute and pretty. And to be asked to do things as sort of a token, and then showing up and realizing not only am I the only woman, so I don't have any backup here, and they can just sort of, this could go very wrong very quickly. But also, I don't think that a room full of white people with one woman completes the circle of diversity. And so I really look forward to more inclusion in that aspect. But let's see, where did it go? Okay, well, if you have time to read this, go ahead. But this is basically the moment where I went, wait a minute. I had an interview from LaVon Pepper Pear Davis, who had passed away before I did the book, but I had some interview material from 1986, I believe, where she's talking about how she really just stopped talking about it. All of these women stopped talking about their experience because when they talked about it, they were met with such pushback. It was just this back and forth conversation of, I played professional baseball, and then they were met with, you mean softball? No, baseball. You mean softball? And to the point where it was like, you can, and I love how Pepper says, you can look them right in the eye and say baseball, and they'll look you right back and say softball. So I read this and I thought, well, that, I was thinking about what that meant for a whole generation of girls and women who didn't know that this league existed, really just for that reason, because these women didn't feel able to really talk about their story, or it just wasn't worth it to them. Pepper said, I couldn't go around carrying my scrapbooks with me everywhere I went to prove it. So I just shut up about it. And these women went on with their lives. Well, then I read, when I was researching this book and starting to write the first manuscript, was also the Women's World Cup was happening in the United States for the first time, which was very exciting. And I also didn't even know there was such a thing. So writing about this book and just doing a Google search for a couple things that I needed to fill in the gaps brought up the fact that the Women's World Cup was happening. And I was like, and that dawned on me, how can I be writing a book about this time, this chapter in women's baseball, and not even know that this thing existed? So I really dove in. I started watching games. I got into it. And there was this article, and Malaika Underwood, who is an incredible athlete. She's the most veteran player on the Team USA, the women's national team for USA Baseball. And I'm reading this, and if you know, I can go back and forth, I could toggle, but if you read the last quote, you see that it's almost verbatim what Pepper Pear Davis was talking about in her experience. You mean softball, no baseball, softball, baseball. And the more women I spoke with or have spoken with over time who played, it's just a common, they're totally used to it. It happens all the time. But Malaika saying, you know, as if I don't know what sport I've dedicated most of my adult life to, you know, and we joked about this, and she said, I'm just waiting for the day when someone says, you mean softball? And she goes, sometimes I'm so tempted to go, oh my God, you're right. I can't believe, okay. You know, or ping pong or whatever. So this was the moment when I decided there's got to be an afterword to this book. This is a really great chapter. It's something that really pulled my own awareness through and could put it back into my own identity. Through it, I mean, here I am. I never had a community of women. All my role models, artists and otherwise, you know, my grandfather was my biggest influence, but really just about everyone in my life were men, and that's fine. That's wonderful. But I had no idea the power and the impact and just the positive reinforcement that could come from a community of women. And to have it in Women in Baseball is just like, it's mind-blowing. It's amazing. It's an amazing opportunity. And that's why I think it's so important that there are more of us, because you know, it's very isolating. Like Perry was saying, just having to recruit her sister to be her partner, because it can be so lonely. And it also, I mean, this is a weird analogy, but if you're a woman at a bar and you're alone sitting at a bar having a drink, we've probably all been there, where you're just waiting for it to happen. You're just waiting for someone to come up and start being weird. And, you know, because I think they see a sitting duck. But if you're with a group of women, it's a little more intimidating. They're a little more respectful. And I don't mean to put that on all men. I'm just saying that is a very familiar situation to a lot of women. So I think it's important that we have each other for this reason. This comment that someone made, you know, like I said, it prompted me to want to write the afterword. So I had the pleasure of interviewing people like Isla Borders, who Sherry was talking about, and Malaika, and Justine, and a young woman by the name of Beth Greenwood, who plays baseball. She played all through Baseball for All. She's kind of like part of the initial group that Justine had worked with, and is now like doing coaching, and she's playing college baseball, which is incredible. But I struggled with this myself, this quote that you see here. But really, you know, I just can't imagine a world without knowing about the history of women in baseball, because it's so illuminating to the present. I experienced it myself. If I didn't dive back in time and realize the possibility, I wouldn't have known about what women are doing in baseball today. But also just that it provides possibility. That's actually Beth on the left there. But that so many young girls didn't know that it happened. And then there are lots of girls playing at this Baseball for All tournament who, you know, I saw it was really, really rewarding to see a level of diversity just among the girls, and to know that, you know, one girl came up and started asking me, she saw a post I made about Toni Stone, and she started asking me about her, and, you know, I gave her a thing I had, and, you know, just seeing someone doing something that you have an interest in doing, or maybe that you didn't even know you had an interest in doing, but then you see them doing it, is everything. So it's weird to have firsts, it's weird to have tokens, you know, but at the same time, when you have that person who is a first, and when you have that token person, you're planting a seed of possibility in someone else, and that will propagate. And so that, to me, was the real value of these women who played in the 1940s and 50s. Just that it plants the seed of possibility. Oh, here, this is probably the slide I should have gone to when I was talking about that. Toni Stone is my absolute hero. And this is actually a really great contrast, because Toni was the only woman. And I don't know if anyone here has read Martha Ackman's biography, Curveball. If you haven't, I highly recommend it, especially because you're all Bay Area people. And it's not only an incredible biography and a wonderful history of the Negro Leagues and of Tony Stone, but it's also a really awesome history of San Francisco, because she gets on a bus when she's young and lands in San Francisco, heads right to the Harlem of the West, the Fillmore district. And the research done on that area of the time is just, I can't wait actually to go back to the city after having read it. And I kind of started taking notes. I want to make a little map for myself and kind of trace the steps of where these establishments had been. She worked in the Alameda shipyards, which my great grandfather was a shipwright there. It was so exciting to think like, oh, that's my town. That's my, and place her story in that spot. But her story is a little bit of a heartbreaking one. It's a story of kind of an unrequited love. So for baseball, so much, just the stuff she went through. It just goes to show how important it is that while it would be awesome to see a woman playing in the major leagues, that would take, the Jackie Robinson story is a very entirely different story. You cannot compare the two, but it would take someone with that level of grit and perseverance and ability to tune out everyone else to make that happen. And you couldn't have an imperfection. You couldn't have a bad at bat in the beginning. It would just, it's brutal. And when you have this camaraderie and this possibility, that's everything. So here's a couple of examples of women that I think it's so wonderful to see them here now. And we've got, Isabel Alvarez, who Cat Williams of the IWBC wrote a biography about. She was recruited from the Cubanas in Cuba and came to play for the All-American Girls. And Veronica Alvarez, there's no relation, but she actually reached out to me right after the book came out and said, can you put me in touch with her? I've always sort of idolized her because we share a last name. We share kind of some cultural background and personal history. And so that was a real pleasure to be able to connect them. But this is sort of, I don't know, a photographic bridge, so to speak. And this is just my favorite quote from the book, which is really, I think, something that, we can all relate to, man, woman, child, whatever. But I think when you're applying it to women, that's particularly meaningful and relatable for the very reasons that Perry and Sherry were talking about, is that you're going to hear people yelling from the stands. You're going to get, I recently got my first batch of really vile hate mail. Never had that before. It's very interesting. Calling me some pretty awful names. I've also had some experiences of other women doing the same, other women artists in baseball being very, I don't know what the word would be, but to be able to tune those things out and channel what Perry's talking about, the sort of the Zen, having the opportunity to be in the moment and just impress yourself is everything. And if you can impress yourself, there's huge value in that. And as Jacqueline Matson says, there's an opportunity then to share that. So that's only just a fraction of the valuable stuff I got out of this experience in writing this book. But of course, I would say, please, read it or buy it if you haven't, but whatever. The point is, there's a lot of resources out there now to learn about these women and also to learn about women in baseball now. Definitely IWBC, definitely Baseball for All. I think what they're doing is incredible. They've built it from the ground up. It's actually proving to be very successful, which I think makes it a little bit vulnerable to organizations with money who kind of want to come in and take credit. Hopefully that doesn't happen, but they're doing amazing things. And it was a joy to watch some of that baseball. And Perry, I feel terrible. We were both there and I didn't get to see you, but yeah, anyway, thank you.
Thank you. Thank all of you tonight for really interesting and enlightening talks about the times that you've had and your thoughts and your feelings about what you've been doing and about women in baseball. It's something that, generally we don't talk about all the time. And one of the things that SABR has just really opened my eyes to so many different aspects and elements of baseball. The Women's Committee in SABR does some wonderful work. The IWBC, take a look at the website and see all the wonderful things that are happening with women in baseball. And I would be really remiss if I didn't thank all of you in our chapters, and my chapter co-leader, Steve Treader, and Zach Ford from Sacramento for the support they've always shared with me. When we first started talking about this idea of a women in baseball meeting, they were all on it. Zach and Steve reached out to you guys right away. So I really appreciate the support that they have provided and that all of you in our chapters have given me for so many years. Questions, let me see, questions in chat before we probably have 10 minutes if we have 10. Great comments, thanks everybody. Are there any questions or comments that people want to make out loud? Since the meeting is being recorded, what's Pat saying? Oh, so after the meeting is recorded, Zach posts it to the Dusty Baker YouTube channel. So all you have to do is go to YouTube and look for Dusty Baker Chapter, and he usually gets it up in a day or two.
Oh,
Any comments, Anika?
sorry,
Go
I
ahead.
just wanted to say really quickly, there is, if y'all haven't heard about it, the Worcester Art Museum, I hope I'm saying that right. It looks like Worcester, like the sauce, but I think it's pronounced Worcester, in Massachusetts. It's a legitimate art museum. They have an incredible collection, so it's very exciting to see baseball elevated to museum level. There's an incredible exhibit called the Iconic Jersey, and it's all about the history of the baseball jersey, and also its presence in American culture, in fashion, and all these in film, in art. It's an incredible looking exhibit. I can't wait to get there. But I was privileged enough to contribute some things to the catalog. I've never seen a catalog like this. It's an incredibly beautiful book. I think you can buy it online. But I am doing a presentation through the Worcester Art Museum this coming Thursday that will actually be all about the All-American girls, their dress, the tunic, the dress, and
cool.
The design of it, the history of it, and also kind of a little bit about advertising design at the time, because it was designed by Otis Shepard mostly, who was a huge influence in advertising design at the time, and he's responsible for other Wrigley things like the Chicago Cubs and gum and stuff like that. Anyway, whether you go to my thing or not, and I can put the link in there for registration, but the exhibit itself looks awesome, and so does the book.
The Baseball Hall of Fame has some wonderful exhibits and did some virtual programming over the past year that you can find on the Hall of Fame website. Recommend taking a look at that. Got some questions in here. John, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, just while I was making the film, I talked to a senior producer at ESPN, a woman, and I asked her, why aren't there more stories? Now, this is 4 years ago. I said, why aren't we hearing more stories about the issue of women being discriminated against in the world of baseball? She says there's too much money at stake, too many, fat cats who would not be happy if there were lots of stories about that. And but she said, don't give up on this story. It's too important. Then the last thing I'll mention, because Perry was a part of this, one of the ways we can change the perception of women in sport is to encourage. A few years ago, I noticed that the Los Angeles Times was giving scant notice to women in sport in Los Angeles. And the USC and UCLA women's soccer team were the top 5 in the nation, and they couldn't get any ink. And so we wrote to them and we said, when you don't write about women in sport, especially those in your area that you're supposed to be reporting on, you are culpable of marginalizing women in American society. Now, I'm not saying we made any changes, but I will say we saw more stories come out after that. And to this day, there are more and more. And hopefully most of them are not women who are scantily clad ice skaters and gymnasts. But that's a big piece that we can do here, is to get after your local sports people, radio, TV, and the newspapers, and say, hey, you're missing a big opportunity to get a bigger audience, which means more money for you through advertising, and you're recognizing women athletes. They're real, they're credible, and we can all do something about it.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
If I can add something to that, I'm a bit of an Olympic historian as well. And if you look at the past 3 or 4 Olympic Games, if it weren't for the women athletes on the American team, the US would be a 3rd ranked country. I mean, way down the list. And a lot of this has to do with the impact Title IX has had on giving women opportunities in a variety of sports. So any opportunity you have to support Title IX, please do that, because without it, the US would be a laughing stock at the Olympic Games.
Simone Biles, 27 golds.
Yeah.
Great point, Jim. Is next year the 50-year anniversary of Title IX?
Yes.
It's coming up soon,
Yeah,
and it's constantly, you know, college sports is dominated by men's basketball and men's football, and those departments would love to just eliminate, you know, anything that takes away
Money
from their departments.
Yeah. Yeah.
Something else to keep our eyes open for. Well, and I forget her first name. Leonoudakis' first name. She just won a gold. Katie just won the 1500 free swim. Great. So, I mean, we could talk about elements of this all night. And Zach just reminded us who Jim Gates is. The Oriole fan in our midst. Yes, yes, yes. So anyway, thanks everybody. If you are interested in learning more, the Women in Baseball Conference will be fantastic. As I said, it's both in person at Rockford, and it's virtual this year, so you can enjoy from the comfort of your home. I will send something out on that to the chapters. I want to thank Jon and Sherry and Perry and Anika for their time tonight. You know what I love about these things is you just kind of never know which way it'll go, but it's always good. And you always learn something. And SABR has just opened my eyes, as I said earlier, to so many different elements of the game that I love, and also sort of expanded my baseball family, you know, that we talk about here too. So Zach, Steve, any final comments? Thank you for your support, and Zach for being a super Zoom host.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Well, I really appreciate
Great panel. Awesome, awesome.
Thank you very much for your leadership on this, Marlene and Anika, Perry, Sherry. I'm really indebted to you to, you know, for spending the evening with us. This has been great. I really appreciate it.
It's been wonderful. Thank
Especially
you.
for you guys on the other time zones. That's very kind of you to stay up late with us.
I'll take any excuse to spend the evening with people in San Francisco. In the Bay
Call me
Area.
anytime I'll stay up with you.
Oh, I love that.
Well,
it was a real
I will
honor.
say,
Thank you, Sherry. It's good to see you.
I'll say good night. I hope I see you at upcoming SABR events or at the Women in Baseball Conference. Check out some of the virtual programs that the Hall of Fame has archived. They're great. And, you know, all the SABR virtual programs are archived on the sabr.org website. So not only ours, but everybody else's. So there's, you know, we're never too far from baseball. So I hope your teams do well the rest of the season. I know there's a lot of Giants fans on this call who are looking for another run, and us Orioles and A's fans and Cubs fans, and I don't know, Mets fans, you know, we're still in it. I mean, the Mets are doing well, yeah. And you know, who knows what's going to happen by Friday. So thank you all for spending your evening with us tonight. We really appreciate it. You stay safe and well, and we'll see you again soon.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.